There was a shimmer on the bathroom carpet when I walked in, a reflection of the sunlight just starting to peek through the blinds. It didn't blind me, but it caught my attention. I glanced down, barefoot, cautious of stepping on something sharp. Caroline hadn't mentioned dropping anything in the bathroom, but who knew? At first, I didn't notice anything because without the light, it blended with the carpet. But then I saw it, a tiny circle of foil glinting up at me. I picked it up. It was the backing from a pill strip, the little foil piece that pops out when you squeeze a pill free. Usually it stays attached, but sometimes it comes loose and falls. One side was blank, the other marked. Since it was Wednesday, I guessed it was Tuesday's pill. At 35, I was healthy, as was Caroline. Neither of us took any medications, and our recent physicals confirmed we were both fit. So why was there a pill strip in my bathroom? The only daily pills I could think of were birth control. Caroline hadn't needed them since my vasectomy 2 years ago, after our second child. She had no issues with cramps or period pain, so why the pills? My first thought was an illness she hadn't told me about. My mind raced to dark places until I remembered our physicals and how we shared our clean reports. If the foil circle was here, the pills had to be nearby. I closed and locked the door. Caroline was still in bed as I began my search. After a while, I found them, hidden at the bottom of a tampon box within a box of aspirin. The strip of pills was unmistakably the same as she took before my surgery and between pregnancies. Why was she taking them again? There was only one answer. She had sex with someone who could get her pregnant. She cheated on me. Caroline and I had been together for 9 years. I had just graduated from university and was on my way to becoming an engineer, while Caroline was working as an assistant. We met at a bar, and although there wasn't an immediate spark, there was enough interest for her to accept my invitation to dinner. Caroline was tall, only a couple of inches shorter than my 5'10" frame. She was a former athlete with an athletic build, a slim figure, and small breasts. Her ass, my favorite part of her body, was simply amazing. We dated for about a year before getting married when I was 26. Our 2 children, Angus and Sonia, were 5 and 2 years old. After their births, I had surgery to prevent any further accidents. 2 was our limit. We had the perfect set, a boy and a girl. I thought we had an impeccable family. Caroline returned to work after taking maternity leave for each child. She loved her job and didn't want to leave it. We had an au pair to look after the kids during the day, even though she cost almost as much as Caroline made. But Caroline didn't mind. She just wanted to work at the job she loved. I worked with a couple of friends, starting an engineering firm. We weren't rich, but we enjoyed our work. After finding the pills, I cleaned up the bathroom, put them back, and decided I needed time to think. Confronting her immediately wouldn't help. I needed a plan and proof. At work, I pondered my options. I needed to know who she was seeing, when, and for how long. Was it someone from work? Could it be her boss? Or was it someone she knew before we met? Another dreadful question lingered. Were our children really mine? I didn't let emotions cloud my judgment. I knew I would feel loss, betrayal, pain, and anger, but first I had to confirm if it was true. I needed more information before drawing any conclusions. I went online. First, I ordered DNA analysis kits to test the children. This could be done easily since I often put them to bed before Caroline arrived. I also ordered surveillance equipment, small voice recorders to hide in her car and bag, and tiny cameras to place around the house. I doubted she was doing it at home, considering she was rarely there without me, or at least I thought so. I needed access to her phone. I knew about a cloning tool that could copy her phone, giving me access to all her messages, emails, and even her calls. To do this, I needed to buy another phone. It took several days for everything to be delivered. During this time, I watched her closely. Caroline didn't act out of the ordinary. Our sex life remained the same, once or twice a week, usually on weekends when we both stayed up late. She didn't smell suspicious, nor did she rush to the shower upon coming home. Nothing changed, so either she wasn't having an affair, or she was extremely discreet, or it had been going on so long it became second nature. The packages arrived on Friday morning. I had them sent to my office to avoid any questions. I received DNA test kits, voice recorders, several cameras, a cell phone, and a cloning kit. I was ready. That day, I left the office early. When I got home, the au pair was feeding the kids dinner before bedtime. I left her to it and hid the cameras, one in the bathroom, one in the living room, and the third in the bedroom with a good view of the bed. I heard the kids splashing in the bathroom and went to help them get ready for bed. Taking Sonia, I left the au pair with Angus. I swabbed Sonia's cheek and put the sample in my pocket. Then I laid her down and read to her until she dozed off. When I checked on Angus, he was still awake and the au pair was reading to him. I offered to take over, and she gratefully agreed. Swabbing Angus took only a moment, and soon he was asleep too. I packaged the swabs with my own and put them in the mailbox. The postman would pick them up in the morning. The service promised results within 48 business hours, meaning Wednesday. Caroline arrived home on time, and we went about our normal routine. She talked about her day, I talked about mine, and neither of us really listened. We had dinner, and then she went to shower. Seizing the opportunity, I installed voice recorders in her car and bag and cloned her phone. Checking the clone for incriminating messages or emails, I found nothing. Either she was very careful, or she wasn't cheating. I couldn't decide. The weekend passed as usual. We had sex both mornings before the kids woke up. It had become almost a ritual, a routine on weekends. She had no calls or messages, and since we spent all our time together, I couldn't check if she was taking the pills. However, the strip showed the corresponding days disappearing, and since it was just her and me at home, I concluded that she did. On Monday, I told her I'd be working from home. She went to the office, giving me the chance to retrieve the flash drives from all the cameras. The bathroom camera confirmed she was taking the pills, but the real surprise was on the bedroom camera. On Saturday night, while I was preparing dinner, she took a shower in the bedroom and used her phone to text someone. There was nothing on the phone I cloned, so she must have a second phone. It wasn't in her bag, so where was it? I watched her actions closely. After texting, she walked to the ventilation duct, released the latch, and hid the phone inside. I immediately checked the air duct, but found nothing. She must hide it there when at home, but take it with her when she leaves. This was my first concrete evidence. Although I still didn't know exactly what she was up to, there were clear signs she might be cheating. I watched footage of her getting dressed that morning and saw her take the phone from the vent and put it in her bag before leaving. In the evening, I watched her closely. She dropped her bag in the hallway and went about her usual routine. After dinner, she took a shower and I looked in her bag. No phone. She must have taken it with her and hidden it again. When she went upstairs, she didn't realize Sonia's room was on the other side of the vent. I crept into Sonia's bedroom and opened the vent on her side. There was the phone. I grabbed it, took it to my office, and cloned it onto my new phone. In a couple of minutes, I returned it and was almost closing the window when I heard my wife getting out of the shower. I quickly sat by Sonia's bed, stroking her hair, when my wife entered. "Something happened?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "I like to come and sit with one or the other of them from time to time," I whispered, just to remind myself how lucky I am to have two such wonderful children. She smiled. "You are a soft old man," she said. "Come on, let's go before you wake her up." I managed to look at the cloned phone the next day, and that's when my world shattered. The sound of my secretary's intercom didn't penetrate as I sat in my office chair, staring at the messages, tears streaming down my face. Eventually, she grew tired of trying and knocked briefly before entering my office. Felicia, my secretary, poked her head through the door and saw me. She was an emotionless woman who dressed much older than her years, slim with red hair and green eyes. I would guess she was between 30 and 40. She always dressed conservatively, in clothes that would be appropriate for someone much older. Our relationship was entirely professional. I never even raised an eyebrow in her direction, though I saw the outcome when someone did. It wasn't pretty. One of my business partners, known as the office ladies' man, flirted with her because he couldn't stand a woman who wouldn't fall for his charms. She told me bluntly that if he didn't stop, she would quit and sue the company for constructive dismissal and sexual harassment. She only refrained because I always treated her with respect. My business partner was furious and gave an ultimatum. Either she would leave or he would. So I ended up owning 60% of the company shares instead of the 40% I started with. I had one less partner. When Felicia saw me, she left, apparently to handle whatever she had been trying to call me about. I heard voices in my outer office, then everything went silent. Felicia returned, closed and locked the door, moved a chair to sit a meter away from me, and faced me. She pulled out some napkins from where women always seem to have a supply and handed them to me. I took them blindly and started wiping my eyes. "Tell me," was all she said. I showed her the phone. There were text messages between Caroline and someone else. The other party wasn't named. No names were used, but they talked about secret meetings and sex that seemed to last forever. Whoever it was knew her well, mentioning things only I should know about, like the small mole on the inside of her thigh and the cute sounds she made during sex. There were other intimate details that only a long-term lover could know. I was never mentioned. It was as if I didn't exist. "Do you know who?" she asked, still businesslike. I shook my head. "How do you know?" I told her about finding the small silver bookmark on the bathroom floor and the pills. The story flowed like a river. The whole time I talked, she just looked at me. After a while, I realized she was holding my hand. It was the first time we had actually touched. "You need more information," she said. "The children's DNA results will be available on Wednesday. Can you hold out until then?" "I don't know," I said. She nodded. "Our producers in Portland need to see you urgently," she said. "I booked you a ticket for the next flight. You'll be back on Thursday." "I can't think about it now," I said. "That's what you tell Caroline," she said. She took my phone, typed a message, and sent it to Caroline. "Something happened in Portland. I need to go and figure it out. I'll be back on Thursday. Love you." The answer came almost instantly. "Okay, let me know when you get there. I'll see you when you get back." She looked at the phone for a second, her lips curling, then handed it back to me and took out hers. "Lorraine," she said. "Felicia, yes, thank you. Where are you free this afternoon?" "Great, see you then." "Go get yourself in order," she told me in a businesslike manner. Her tone and the fact that I was almost conditioned by her to do what she told me propelled me into action. In the office, I did just that. It was actually nice not having to think postponing decisions and plans for someone else. When I came out of the bathroom, she was holding my jacket. "Where are we going?" I asked. "You have an appointment with an old friend of mine," she said. I just went along. Lorraine turned out to be Felicia's best friend and a divorce lawyer. She had been working on Felicia's divorce when Felicia discovered her husband was cheating on her with one of his employees. Felicia explained the situation to Lorraine, and I watched in a state of stupor. This couldn't be happening to me. Lorraine had obviously seen this many times in her career. Once she had all the facts, she turned her attention to me. "Gary," she said, though it didn't feel like she was talking to me. I felt a sting on my cheek. Felicia had slapped me awake. I saw shock and amusement in Lorraine's eyes, but they quickly disappeared when she looked at me. "Gary," she repeated. I nodded. "Do you have any ideas what you want to do with this?" At these words, my engineer brain kicked in. Plans were my forte. "Kill them both," I said. I expected a shocked reaction from Felicia, but surprisingly, she grinned. "Okay," Lorraine said. "I understand, but unfortunately that's not an option. It's against the law. However, we have several legal options. Let's look at them. I'm just laying out your options. I'm not advocating any of them. This may happen later. The first option is to do nothing. She doesn't know that you know. You've had a pretty happy life, so keep up the good work playing the ignorant game. Secondly, an amicable divorce. File a statement of irreconcilable differences. Divide your company, home, and finances. She makes less than you, so you'll probably have to pay child support for several years, at least until the kids graduate from high school. Thirdly, go nuclear. Sue for adultery. If the children aren't yours, sue for a fake birth certificate. Sue the other party for alienation of affection. If he's the father, sue to get back all the money you spent on the kids. If he's a coworker, sue him for not following the fraternization policy. Almost every company has one. If the other party is married, provide their partner with all the information about the affair. If she knows, we can have a case against her. If not, I can represent her interests in the divorce. Make it public. Tell everyone, friends, relatives, colleagues. If she's a member of any societies or church groups, tell them to humiliate her. We need to protect your assets. Sell your share of the company into an offshore trust, mortgage the house, take whatever you can. Take the cash, along with the money from the company, cash out your 401k, and throw a party in Vegas. My thoughts raced. Option 1 was not an option. I was no one's willing cuckold. I had been an unconscious cuckold for too long. Option 2, not a chance. I had spent too much time building the business and our lifestyle. She could forget about taking half of everything I had and letting me support her while she had fun with someone else. Option 3, I said, nuclear. Lorraine smiled. Fine then, I'll start the paperwork. I suggest covert surveillance of your wife to find out who, when, and where. We need more evidence. Can I keep this phone? It's not doing you any good. I nodded and handed her the phone. Felicia and I left Lorraine's office, and she took me to a small family hotel. She booked a room for me. Go take a shower and order something for your room, she said. She took full responsibility. I'll be back later with some things for you. I acted mechanically. My whole world was crumbling around me, yet there I was, in a hotel room, mindlessly ordering room service as if I were on autopilot. This was my only way to handle the overwhelming stress. 9 years of deception. The most painful part was my complete ignorance of the situation. How could I have been so blind? Who was the other person? Was it the same boss she went back to after each child? She always said she loved her job and her independence, but was that the truth or just an excuse to be near her lover? I glanced towards the minibar, teetering on the edge of giving in, when Felicia walked in. Don't even think about it, she commanded. I need you to think clearly, not drown your sorrows. You need a plan, and you can't make one if you're looking at the world through the bottom of a bottle. A plan? I asked, my voice heavy with despair. I tried that. I had a plan, a good one. I had a loving wife and 2 beautiful children. Now look at me. I have a cheating wife, and I don't even know if these kids are mine. I'm the biggest fool in the world. My life is falling apart, and you want me to plan it out? She stared at me for a few moments. I hoped she would say something comforting, maybe even hug me. Instead, she checked her watch and said briskly, Okay, the pity party is over. How many times did you face obstacles and see your plans fail when we were starting the company? What does that have to do with this? I asked, bewildered. How many? She persisted. A lot, I admitted. There was a time when the patent office lost our application for an inversion filament, yet we still clinched the deal against all odds. And when the bank tried to foreclose on us early because they were under pressure. Exactly, she said. And at any point during those times, did you just sit down, put your head in your hands, and give up? That was different, I argued. Why? She challenged. What was different back then? Then, I had something to fight for, I replied. I had a family that depended on me. You have a family now, she said, which also depends on you, and it is much larger than the family you have at home. 141 people and their families are counting on you to manage this. None of your partners can keep the company afloat. While you're all engineers, you're the only one with business acumen. If you falter, the company falters. Do you think this woman cares about the families relying on your company? If she gets half, she'll sell to the highest bidder, and you'll lose control. You know who'll buy it, and they'll own everything you've built. Is that what you want? I stared at her. She was right. I had poured too much time and effort into the company to let it fall into the hands of the highest bidder. I needed to ensure my future and my family's. If the kids were mine, I'd make sure they were taken care of. As for Caroline, she made her bed. I could mourn this relationship once everything else was secure. Clarity replaced my confusion, and driven by anger and determination, I sat down with Felicia to strategize. I was going to protect the company's future and take care of my only remaining family. The moment I made that decision, everything clicked. The pain faded, the indecision vanished, and I had no doubts. Felicia noticed the change in my demeanor and nodded in approval. That's the Gary I need right now, she said, someone who knows how to plan for the future. We spent the evening making plans to secure the company's future. Initially, I considered selling my shares to my partners, but Felicia rejected this. She doubted their ability to run the company or keep me in charge once they had majority control. They would ruin everything. I needed to maintain control. In the end, we decided to create an offshore trust and sell the company to it at market price. I would stay on as CEO with a minimal salary as the trust was offshore and beyond the court's jurisdiction. This way, the trust's owners would remain anonymous. On paper, I was now a millionaire, or would be once everything was finalized. I had to liquidate all my assets, including cashing out my 401k and freeing up all the home equity. Although we were together when we bought the house, it was solely in my name since Caroline wasn't working at the time. She was pregnant with Angus, and the mortgage advisor suggested it would be simpler to secure the loan in my name alone. I compiled a list of tasks and contacted my lawyer, who handled the company's legal matters, to arrange a meeting the next day. After Felicia left, I took a shower and went to bed, not expecting to sleep much. Surprisingly, I passed out immediately and slept until my phone's alarm woke me up the following morning. On my phone, there was a message from Caroline. "You didn't inform me of your arrival. Is everything okay?" I replied, "Sorry, I planned until late, then I fell asleep. Everything is coming together now. I should be back on Thursday." She responded, "Okay, see you. Love you. XX." I didn't reply. I just couldn't bring myself to type those words. Felicia knocked on my door a little after 8. I took another shower and was just thinking about going to breakfast when she suggested breakfast. We walked to a nearby diner and sat in a booth, eating bacon and pancakes with maple syrup. Part of me couldn't fathom why I was acting so normally, as if my world hadn't just collapsed. I figured that once everything settled, it would all hit me. But for now, I needed to stay focused on work. "Brian Spencer," Felicia said, referring to my lawyer. "He called to say he could meet us at 10. We can visit your bank first to cash out your 401k and release equity from your house," she suggested. "Before we go, I get that consolidating my money is essential," I said, "but there's still a record of everything. Can't the court just order me to pay her half?" "Only if you still have it," Felicia grinned. "That's where Vegas comes in. Once you have all the capital, you spend a week in Vegas and blow a lot of money. Do this before you file for divorce. That way, when you're judged in court, you'll appear poor and in debt. The bank will foreclose on your house, and your salary will barely cover your living expenses. This is provided the children aren't yours. If they are, you'll put your entire 401k in trust for their college fund, making it untouchable for Caroline. Technically, she will earn more than you. She can easily afford the house on her own, and may even end up paying you alimony. When will you get the DNA results?" Felicia asked. "The company said the results should appear on the internet sometime today," I replied, picking up my phone. I checked the email they sent me and clicked the link. It started to load, but then I set the phone down. I wasn't sure I was ready to see the results yet. "Remember, can you check?" I pushed the phone towards Felicia. She took it and scrolled through the screen a few times. I watched her face, searching for clues, trying to guess what she might say. "The results aren't ready yet," she said. "According to the tracking data, they should be available within the next 12 hours. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Let's go," she said, standing up. "The bank should be open by now." Freeing up the equity in the house and cashing out my 401k took surprisingly little time. I closed all our savings accounts, including the kids' college funds, and transferred the money to an account I opened in my name. The only account I left was the joint one we used daily, which had less than $10,000. My lawyer, Brian, threw a wrench into our plans, but if anyone could do it right, it was him. "You're forgetting one thing," he said as we outlined our plan. "You have a marriage contract." "I do." "It was a condition of the partnership agreement when you started working," he reminded me. "All partners had to enter a prenuptial agreement to protect the company in case of a breakup. It only covered the company, not personal assets. For divorce purposes, you're considered an employee, so at most, she can claim your salary and 401k. "What do you suggest?" I asked. "Use the equity from your house and 401k to buy out one of your partners," he said. "Robert has hinted he wants to cash out. You don't have enough funds, but you could take a loan from the company pension fund. Payments will come from your salary, reducing your income for asset assessment. Since everything else will be tied to the company, it's protected. Your credit will take a hit when the bank forecloses on your house, and you'll lose half of what's in the bank, but she won't get anything else. We can lower your salary so much that she may even pay you child support. What will I live on? I asked. If my entire salary goes to loan payments, I still need somewhere to live and eat. Not to mention the kids. At least I think they're mine. Wait until the results, he advised. Have you decided what to do if they aren't yours? Will you stay involved in their lives? I don't know, I said. It's too terrible to think about. I need to know for sure first. Don't forget about suing her company, he said. You could get enough from that lawsuit to pay off the loan and return to a full salary. Plus, you could demand compensation from the children's father if they aren't yours. Since this will happen post-divorce, it won't be part of the settlement. Can you contact Robert and see if he's interested in selling? I asked. I'll handle it and let you know, he said. We shook hands and left his office. I felt a bit relieved as we walked out. The plans were coming together, which always gave me satisfaction. Then I remembered why we made these plans, and the relief vanished, leaving emptiness in my chest. While having lunch at a diner, I dared to look at my phone again. I couldn't bring myself to do more than click on the link before handing it to Felicia. Once again, I watched her face, waiting for the reaction. I'm so sorry, Gary, she said softly. It was the most unbusinesslike answer I'd ever heard. She handed me the phone, and I read the results. Neither child was biologically mine. They had the same father, but it wasn't me. The double blow of losing both my children was replaced by the rage I felt at the betrayal. Not only did she pass these children off as mine, but she also convinced me to have a vasectomy, meaning I could no longer have children. Gary, Felicia snapped, bringing me back to reality. Now is not the time or place. Keep calm. We will get through this, I promise. I took a few deep breaths, suppressing my anger. I really wanted to cause serious physical harm to someone. I even thought about hiring a hitman to kill the bastard who fathered the children who were supposed to be mine. Felicia pulled herself together and led me out of the diner. Lorraine called, she said. She wants to see you. We headed to Lorraine's office. Lorraine looked grim when we arrived. I have a preliminary report from a private investigator, she said. Obviously, Caroline wasted no time last night. A man came to your house and stayed the night. We couldn't look inside. I have cameras installed in the house, I said. I can go swap the flash drives and we can see what happened. Okay, she said. Go ahead and do it now, and then we can make a plan. I'm guessing the information on these flash drives will be important. There will be an au pair there, I said. I can't go back. It is believed that I will be out of town on business. Lorraine checked her phone. The au pair is at the play center with Sophie and Angus, she said. I'll keep an eye on her and let you know if she comes out. My house was about 30 minutes from Lorraine's office, and Felicia was driving fast. We got there without incident, and I changed the flash drives. We quickly examined the house, but did not see anything untoward. We then returned to Lorraine's office. We checked the flash drives. I decided not to look at the one in the bedroom. I didn't need to see what was happening there. It was clear we were talking about a man as soon as he walked through the door. As I suspected, it was her boss, Charlie Wright, the man she worked for the entire time we were together. What almost killed me was what happened when he pulled up to the house. First, he had his own key and entered the house. As he entered, Angus looked up and saw him. "Papa Charlie," he exclaimed and ran to hug him. This freed my hands. I broke down and started crying. I couldn't watch anymore. Lorraine watched as I broke down. Felicia, for the first time ever, hugged me and held me while I cried. It took a while, but eventually I pulled myself together. "Do you want to rest a little?" Lorraine asked. I shook my head. The pain subsided a little, but anger began to take over again. "What's next?" I asked. "I already have a copy of the terms of employment in your wife's company," Lorraine said. "There's an anti-fraternization clause, so you have a case against the company for violating it. Since the person with whom your wife is fraternizing is a top manager of the company cannot claim they didn't know what was happening." We explained to Lorraine what my company's lawyer had told me and his advice. She burst into a huge smile. She picked up the phone and called him, asking for copies of the prenuptial agreement, which he emailed to her. "This is just perfect," she said, reading the marriage contract. "Throw away everything I said before. Your lawyer's plan is absolutely correct. If your partner wants out, buy him out. Put everything you have into the company, and it will immediately be out of reach. We can sue her company for failure to comply with a court order, him for alienation of affection, her for making a false statement on the birth certificate, and both for money spent on the children so far. The medical charges for childbirth alone are significant. It all depends on whether Robert wants to sell." "I guess we'll have to wait for his answer," I said. Felicia drove me back to the hotel, and I went up to my room. I was just about to sit on the bed when there was a knock on the door. I opened it to see her standing in the corridor. "Let's go," she said. "You can't stay here." "What?" I asked. "Because you can't be alone," she said. "You will only brood or attack the minibar. I want you where I can look after you." While she talked, she collected my few belongings. She took my hand and led me out of the room, then guided me to her car. "Where are we going?" I asked, finding that I didn't care. "To my house," she said. "I have a spare room you can use." "But I began. She turned her head and looked at me. I fell silent. I had never been to Felicia's house and was surprised to see that her house was almost the same size as mine. Mine had 2 floors, while hers had only 1. She led me into a room with an attached bathroom. "Take a shower and change," she ordered. "Dinner in 30 minutes. We ate dinner in silence. It was probably delicious, but I couldn't taste it. My mind was a whirlpool of thoughts that refused to calm down. I was furious, but too drained to express it. I was devastated, but too exhausted to feel it fully. All I could manage was to carry out my plans. I was on autopilot, my destination set. Just as I was wondering what to do after dinner, the phone rang. I winced, hoping it wasn't Caroline. "Hello, Robert," I said wearily. "Why?" was all he asked. Robert and I had been friends since university. We studied together, and the project we worked on together laid the foundation for our business. Initially, I owned most of the company because I had more capital to invest than he did. "Caroline is cheating on me," I said, my voice faltering. "None of the children are mine." There was silence on the other end. "So, you want to tie all your assets to the company and hide behind a prenuptial agreement?" he asked. Either Brian Spencer, our lawyer, had explained everything to him, or he understood the partnership agreement better than I did. "I want to keep 5%, he said, "and stay with the company as a consulting engineer. I'll discuss the details with HR. The rest is yours." "Okay," I said. "I'll ask Brian to prepare the documents." "Gary," he said after a pause, "I'm really sorry. I know it doesn't feel that way now, but it will get easier. I promise. I've been almost where you are, and it does get easier." Only then did I remember that he had gone through a divorce about 4 years ago. Even though we were friends, he was very private, and I didn't know the details. I just knew it was rough. So he remembered the marriage contract he used himself. The next morning, Felicia woke me up with a cup of coffee. "Let's go," she said. "We still have a lot to do." The first thing we did was visit Brian Spencer, the company lawyer. He had already prepared the documents for my buyout of Robert, and we completed the transaction in less than 30 minutes. I handed over everything I took from my home, my savings, and my 401k. I also had to take out a loan against the company pension plan for the remaining amount. Now, on paper, I was about $1 million in debt. My salary was nearly halved because the benefits were deducted before taxes. Then we went to Lorraine's office. I showed her all the documents for the deal, and she was thrilled. "This is perfect," she said. "I'll draft the documents today, and we can submit them on Monday. If you want, we can serve them to him, her, and the company simultaneously." "Where do you want her to be served?" she asked. "Where it will cause her maximum embarrassment," I replied. "If you could do it through a Charlie board at the Super Bowl, I'd gladly pay for it." Lorraine laughed. "We'll serve her in the office," she said. "On Monday at 10 in the morning, provided that the papers go through the court by then. If I send them today, I should have them by tomorrow afternoon." I nodded. "So what now?" I asked, looking at Felicia. She was running things now. "We have 2 more stops before you go back to the office and pretend you just got back from fighting a fire in Portland. Can you hold out at home until Monday?" I think I'll have to, I said. No need to guess, she said. Tell me what you need to help you hold out until then. I don't know, I said. Any good news? She smiled at me. Then let's go, she said. To my surprise, we stopped at the medical center where I had all my checkups and the procedure that meant I would never be a father. What are we doing here? I asked. Didn't you want good news? She said. Let's go. I followed her into the clinic and stood aside while she walked to the reception desk. The administrator nodded and motioned for us to sit down. We sat down. 2 minutes later, Dr. Harrington came out and invited me into the consultation room. I looked at Felicia, who didn't move to follow me. Please, I said, and she nodded, joining me. Dr. Harrington made no comment about Felicia's presence. He knew who she was and that she wasn't my wife, since he was both my doctor and Caroline's. Gary, he said, I understand you wanted to ask about vasectomy reversal. My eyes widened. Is this even possible? I looked at Felicia, who had a small smile on her face. Yes, it is possible, Dr. Harrington said. Since your vasectomy was performed 3 years ago, the success rate for reversal operations is about 95%. The surgery is a bit longer than the original and involves general anesthesia, but I'm confident you'll be able to father children again once we're done. Tears filled my eyes. I still had a chance to become a father. Surgery was a small price to pay for that possibility. I know it's hard to accept, the doctor continued, but here's information about the operation and its cost. Unfortunately, it won't be covered by your insurance. If you decide to proceed, let me know and we can schedule you for testing. Thank you, doctor, Felicia said, standing up and taking the information from him. We'll be in touch. I followed her out of the clinic and towards her car. Is this good enough news? She asked, smiling softly at me. In an impulse, I hugged her tightly. Thank you, I said, burying my face in her hair. Realizing what I had done, I quickly stepped back. I'm so sorry. It's okay, Gary, she said softly. Everything is fine. We got into her car. One more stop, then back to the office, she said. I had visited Charlie Wright's house several times over the years. Caroline worked for him. He and his wife, Stephanie, lived in a nice gated community just outside the city. They held some corporate events here, I said. Why? I asked as Felicia got out of the car and walked to the door of the house. I followed her. We didn't have to knock. The security guard had informed Stephanie of our arrival, and she was waiting at the door. Gary, she greeted me. You must be Felicia, his secretary. Was it you who called? Yes, it was me, Felicia answered. Come on in, Stephanie said, leading us into an office-like room off the hallway. I'd never been in this room before. Judging by the photographs on the table and wall, it was Charlie's office. Stephanie sat down and pointed to the chairs opposite her. How can I help you? She asked, looking at me. I sat unable to speak. Did you know? I finally asked. Stephanie sighed. No, she said. I suspected but didn't know. I could never find any evidence to take to a lawyer. Otherwise, I would have taken the bastard for every penny he had. Felicia muttered, Do you have evidence? I nodded. Proof that none of my children are mine, that they have the same father. Video of him and Caroline at my house where my son calls him. I couldn't finish the sentence. The lump in my throat threatened to choke me. Oh, Gary, I'm so sorry, she said. I suspected for years, but he was so careful. I followed him, checked his phone, email. I even confronted him, but he managed to convince me I was just paranoid. The investigators I hired found nothing. If I had proof, I would have come to you. But I couldn't ruin what looked like a happy marriage based on suspicion alone. I needed to be sure, and I couldn't get any proof. What are you going to do? She asked. I hesitated, wondering if I should reveal my plans. It was unknown if she would tell him everything as soon as he returned home. It might be too late for him to do anything meaningful, but still, I needed to be cautious. But I wanted it to be as shocking for him as it was for me. The question is, what are you going to do? I asked. Now you have proof, she said with a slight smile. I understand, she said. And I don't blame you. I wouldn't either. If you have the name of a good divorce lawyer, I would appreciate it. Felicia took a business card from her purse and handed it to her. Thank you, Stephanie said. Will a week be enough? I nodded. Great, she said. I'll contact them. She showed the card, and I agreed with her. She stood up, signaling the end of our meeting. Felicia and I also stood up. Stephanie came over and gave me a quick hug and a peck on the cheek. Again, I'm so sorry, she said. Look after him, she told Felicia. He deserves better than what he's been through. We returned to the office, and I spent the rest of the day catching up on things I missed while in Portland. At the end of the day, I went home. Felicia knocked on my door at her usual time, looked in, and said she was heading out. She was back to being the professional she always was, which left me feeling a bit lost. I felt like I was starting to get closer to her, but maybe that was just my imagination. I wished her good night and thanked her for her help. I stayed late at the office, catching up on work. Around 8, I received a message from Caroline. "What time will you be home?" "Probably another hour or two," I replied. "I need to finish up some things after the trip." "I'll probably be asleep already. I have to get up early in the morning. I love you XX." Once again, I couldn't bring myself to respond. I continued working until almost 11, hoping she would be asleep when I got home. The less I had to interact with her, the better. When I returned home, the house was dark. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I checked on Sonia and Angus. They were both asleep, looking as adorable as ever. I felt a sob welling up and hid in the bathroom. I couldn't let Caroline catch me crying over children that weren't even mine. I still hadn't decided what to do about them. It's unlikely they would remember me if I left. I had no obligation to them, but I still loved them. How could I abandon them when, less than 48 hours ago, they were my pride and joy? Now, they were just evidence of my wife's infidelity. I decided to wait and see what happened next. The decision might not be up to me anyway. I went to bed, trying not to wake Caroline. I didn't fall asleep right away, and when the alarm clock woke me in the morning, Caroline had already left. When I went downstairs, the housekeeper was in the kitchen feeding the children. I looked at her, wondering if she knew. It seemed impossible she didn't. Had she been laughing at me, the clueless fool who couldn't satisfy his wife? Did she know the children weren't mine? Did she take them to say goodnight to Papa Charlie as often as she did to me? My mind was racing with images of her and Caroline having an affair with Charlie while the kids cried in the next room. I shook my head angrily. She knew, I concluded, and on Monday I would take pleasure in firing her. I would make sure she never worked as an au pair again. I'd inform the agency. But wait, what was I doing? Taking my anger out on someone who had no control over the situation was wrong. If she had told me, she would have lost her job. She could have left, but maybe she cared for the children too, having looked after them even before Sonia was born. I was angry, but maybe not at the right person. I went to work. When I arrived, Felicia was already in the office, as if the past few days had never happened. She was all business, but I noted in my planner that she had cleared my day for what she called marketing. I settled into my office, and she brought me my morning coffee, as she had for the past 9 years. Then she sat down on the other side of the table. Only then did I notice she had brought coffee for herself too. "Marketing?" I asked. "Since when have I been involved in marketing?" She grinned, a rather wicked grin that, for some reason, warmed me inside. "We need to make a plan," she said. "The last part of Lena's strategy." I looked at her, puzzled. "What?" "Tell everyone," Felicia said. "Your friends, family, church groups, volunteer groups, everyone she interacts with needs to know who she is and what she has done." "It won't put me in a good light," I said. "I'll become a laughingstock, a cuckold who can't even satisfy his wife and is raising other people's children." "You have to tell your story," she insisted. "If you don't, Caroline will, and believe me, she'll make you look much worse than an ignorant cuckold. She could paint you as an abusive husband or someone who mistreats their children. People will believe her lies, and when we expose her, she'll retaliate with everything she's got. Speak up first, and people will be less likely to believe her counter-accusations. Some will believe her, of course, but we can't help that." Felicia put together a media package containing all the evidence of Caroline's infidelity, a private investigator's report, the DNA test showing I wasn't the father of my 2 children, and copies of videos taken in my house, including one of Angus greeting Charlie, plus videos from the bedroom that I hadn't seen and didn't want to see. Later that morning, I received an email from Lorraine. Apparently, Stephanie had given her a sample of Charlie's DNA. Lorraine checked it against my test results. and it confirmed he was definitely the father of both children. I paused, realizing I had stopped thinking of them as my children. We included this new information in the package and prepared it for distribution. We planned to send it to Caroline's parents, my parents, and Caroline's brother and sister, with whom I was very close. Electronic copies would go to all her Facebook and LinkedIn contacts and anyone else I could think of. For our immediate family, I hired a courier service to deliver the packages at 10 o'clock on Monday morning, the exact time the full moon was supposed to rise. I just needed to get through the weekend. I devised a plan to do this. Being an engineer, it took me less than an hour to design and build a small device with a motor, timer, and battery. It would vibrate after a set time. When I got home on Friday night, I hid the device under Sophie's pillow. After the au pair left, it was set to go off at 6 a.m. the next morning, the usual time we woke up. This would wake Sophie and eliminate our weekend morning sex. Everything worked perfectly. I was woken by Sophie climbing into our bed, effectively preventing any intimacy with Caroline. I smiled to myself. I managed to stay busy all Saturday, doing tasks Caroline had asked me to do for months. When she commented, I simply said it was time they were done, since she'd been pestering me for so long. On Saturday night, when Caroline tried to initiate sex, I pretended to be asleep. And on Sunday, the device woke Sophie again. We spent Sunday at the zoo. Several times I looked at Caroline, the woman I loved and thought loved me, and the two children I believed were mine. I almost broke down. I bit my cheek until it bled, trying to contain my emotions, but I made it through the weekend. On Monday, I was anxious. I told Caroline I would work from home. She left at her usual time, poking her head into my office to say goodbye. I pretended to be engrossed in emails and grunted in response. I heard her car leave the garage and the door close. I checked the clock, 8:15. The au pair knocked on my office door, asking to take the children to the play center. I said no, surprising her as I'd never refused before. She nodded and went back to the children. I heard Angus being upset that he couldn't go. A little after 9, Stephanie arrived at the house. I was surprised but let her in. For the first time since I'd known her, I made coffee for her. At 10:30, we had a conference call with Lorraine. "Gary," Lorraine said, "this is your last chance to stop. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying that if you changed your mind over the weekend, now is the time to say it." "No," I said without hesitation. "Then I'll see you on the other side," Lorraine said. Everything was ready. I kept an eye on my email inbox, waiting for service confirmation emails to arrive. At exactly 10 a.m., the first one arrived, the second 3 minutes later, and the third 5 minutes after that. Then, my phone rang. It wasn't Caroline as I thought, but my mother. "Gary, hi Mom," I said. "What's happening?" she asked. "Did you read the package I sent?" I asked. "Yes, but I don't understand." "Then you know as much as I do," I said. "Caroline has been cheating on me, probably our entire married life, with her boss. The children are not mine. I'm divorcing her." "Gary, you can't," my mom said. "No, Mom. Listen, I have to work. I have other calls," I said, and I hung up. The phone immediately rang again. This time it was Caroline. "Gary," she said. I didn't answer, waiting for her to continue. "We need to talk," she said. Still, no answer. "I'm coming home," she ended the call. "Caroline is on her way," I told Felicia. "I'll step aside," she said. I wanted to ask her to stay, but I didn't know how. I just looked at her. "Call me," she said, "when you find out what's going on." She left. Caroline arrived home about 20 minutes later. Her car pulled up to the house. She didn't even bother going into the garage. I didn't know what to expect when she walked in. Would she come in armed with explanations or slip away with her tail between her legs? She walked into my office and sat down opposite me at the table. "Gary," she began. "Not interested," I interrupted. "But you don't even want." "No," I said. "I don't want to hear a single word from your mouth. You lied to me for 9 years. Neither child is mine, but you convinced me to get a vasectomy while you were still on the pill so you could continue with Daddy Charlie." At these words, her eyes widened. "So no, Caroline," I continued. "I don't care what you have to say. My lawyer's card is in the package you received when you were served. If you have something you think I should know, talk to her." "What about the children?" she asked. "What children?" I responded. "I don't have children, and if it were up to you, I never would. I would ask why you did this to me. but I don't want to hear another lie. I'm not interested in your excuses, justifications, or reasons. I want this to end so I can pick up what's left of my life and move on. I called the au pair into the room. She could hear me because my office door was open and she was in the next room. You're fired, I said immediately. Leave right now. What? She said. Why? I said, pointing at Caroline. You knew she was having sex with her boss. I don't know if you knew the kids were his and not mine, but you definitely knew what was going on. I have video evidence of you talking to Charlie about the children. Get out. Gary, Caroline said, you can't fire her. I pay her salary, I said. The au pair looked at Caroline with gratitude in her eyes. Okay, I said. I have already contacted the agency and informed them that you were complicit in an extramarital affair. I agreed not to take action against their company if they removed you from their register. So, if Caroline wants to keep you, she will not only have to pay you, but also handle all the other things like taxes, vacation, pension, sickness, and insurance. The au pair's face turned pale. Not only had she lost her job, but she was also removed from the agency's books. This would make it almost impossible for her to find other domestic work, as agencies talk to each other. Now get out, I said, and she ran away. Did you have to do this? Caroline said. She shouldn't have. You started talking again, I said. I told you I don't want to hear it. What I want is for you to get your things, get your kids, and get out of my house. This is my home too, she said. According to the documents, no, I said. It is registered in my name only, so until the courts rule otherwise, get the hell out. She jumped slightly at my shout. Just then Angus entered the room. Mommy, he said. Sonia trailed behind him. Caroline, with a stunned expression and tears streaming down her cheeks, stood up and walked towards her daughter. I closed my office door and stayed inside while she packed her things. A few minutes later, she returned holding Sonia in her arms. Are you going to say goodbye to Sonia? She asked. Not this time, I said. She is not my daughter, and he is not my son. Take them to Papa Charlie and let him take care of his children. They have nothing to do with me. Gary, get out, I said. I heard the front door close, and a few minutes later, her car started up. She was gone. I released the breath I had been holding for what seemed like an eternity and crashed to pieces. I didn't hear the door open, and I jumped when a pair of arms wrapped around me, and I buried my head in my hands. I looked up and saw Felicia holding me. She pulled me close and hugged me as I sobbed. It took a while to pull myself together again. I had just thrown away 9 years. My marriage, my children, my life were gone. I didn't want to face the world anymore. Felicia took charge again. Let's go, she said. Lorraine mentioned it would take Caroline about 4 hours to get an emergency warrant to occupy the house because she has children and it's a matrimonial home. She will be back. Do you really want to please her by letting her throw you out of your own home? We gathered some of my clothes and important documents. I had to figure out where to stay, so we loaded my things into Felicia's car and left. We went to the office first, where I was served later that day. Lorraine called me to wait for the presentation. There was not only an order to occupy the house, but also a restraining order, meaning I was forbidden to come within 100 meters of the house. If I needed to pick up anything, I had to make an appointment and be accompanied by Caroline's attorney at my expense. Not fully understanding what was happening, I found myself moving into Felicia's spare room. All my clothes were in the closet, and all my papers were neatly stacked in the office cabinets. A week had passed since Caroline filed. I would work and then go back with Felicia to her house to eat and sleep. In the mornings, she brought me coffee, cooked breakfast, and then we went to the office together. It seemed like nothing had changed between us. She was still all business, and other than a hug when I broke down on the first day, there was no personal interaction. However, I had nothing to smile about anyway. On Monday morning, we had an appointment with the lawyers for the company that Caroline and Charlie worked for. I didn't know the details, but apparently we filed a claim for an amount the company couldn't afford. They had insurance, but the maximum payout was $1 million, and we were claiming much more than that. Their lawyers were businesslike. Lorraine, my lawyer, grinned like a Cheshire cat. What needs to be done? Their lawyer asked. For you to agree to the immediate and permanent dismissal with loss of pension of the senior member, Lorraine replied, and also an obligation to keep Caroline on staff for at least 3 years and 1.5 million. I wasn't really listening as they exchanged words. In the end, they agreed to all of the above, but I would only get $750,000. This would at least pay off some of the debt I had to the company pension fund. All this will be paid after the divorce is finalized, said Lorraine. They nodded. They understood. Lorraine stayed with us for the next meeting. It was a meeting with Charlie Wainwright's lawyers. I left their office $500,000 richer. Now I had enough money to completely repay the pension fund loan, and I still had a small amount left over, or I would have after the divorce. My last meeting of the day was with Caroline's lawyers. Caroline was in the office with them, but didn't look at me when I entered. Felicia was with me, as was Lorraine. This accounting and the divorce petition is simply ridiculous, Caroline's lawyer began. Your client is the main shareholder and CEO of a company whose value, according to recent estimates, is about $20 million, not to mention the assets in the house, savings, and 401k. I suggest. Let me stop you there, Lorraine interrupted, pulling a stack of papers from her briefcase. According to the prenuptial agreement signed by all parties, the company is not subject to divorce. My client recently made a significant additional investment in the company that took most of his savings, his entire 401k, and his home equity loan. He also had to take out a loan from the company's pension fund. One of the partners wanted to sell out, and it was crucial to prevent the shares from falling into the hands of a competitor who has been trying to take over the business for years. Because of the pension fund loan, my client is now on a reduced salary, earning less than your client. Therefore, I will be asking the court to establish a maintenance agreement to support him while he gets back on his feet. What about the children? Asked Caroline's lawyer. There is DNA evidence that these children are not his, Lorraine replied. Caroline deliberately falsified birth records to list my client as the father with the intent to defraud. Additionally, and this is a separate issue, we are seeking damages for serious assault when she knowingly persuaded him to undergo surgical sterilization, which he agreed to under the belief that he was the father of the children. The alternative is for your client to sign the divorce as is, pack up her belongings, and leave the marital home in his hands. She will receive half of the joint account, which currently has a balance of $944,315. The lawyer looked at the papers, then at Caroline. For the first time, she looked at me. Gary, please, she said. 9 years, I said. 9 years you lied to me, day after day. You have nothing to tell me that I want to hear. Caroline looked at her lawyer and nodded. She signed the papers. I wasn't there when she left the house. I just received a letter from her lawyer saying the restraining order had been lifted and the house was now mine. I could return any time, but I decided against it. Instead, I put the house on the market. It didn't cover the entire amount I owed the bank, but I made up the difference and the bank was satisfied. 2 months passed and I was still living in Felicia's spare room. After our divorce, Caroline moved in with her parents. Despite all the evidence I provided, they firmly sided with her and refused to talk to me. For me, it was no loss. For some reason, Stephanie did not divorce Charlie as she had promised. I didn't know why and didn't want to find out. Because Charlie lost his corporate job and pension, they had to sell their house in the gated community and move into a small apartment. Charlie still had connections and skills in the market, so he found a reasonable job and earned a living, though not as much as before. I don't know if he and Caroline met again. I haven't seen her since that day at her lawyer's office and had no interest in doing so. I was sitting at my desk at work when Felicia knocked and entered without waiting for an answer. Charlie Wainwright is dead, she said bluntly. What? I asked. Apparently, Stephanie caught him with Caroline again, she said. She shot him. I leaned back in my chair, a huge grin spreading across my face. I tried to remove it, but couldn't. Nothing could have happened to a nicer guy, I finally said. Felicia laughed. Are you angry, I asked her, because I'm happy about this? Not at all, Felicia said. That bastard got what he deserved. By the way, this just arrived. She placed an official envelope on my desk. We both knew what it was. I took it and opened it. That's all, I said. I'm finally a free man. Finally, Felicia echoed. Then she did what I least expected. She kissed me. It wasn't a peck on the cheek or even on the lips. It was a full-fledged kiss with tongue, lips, and curling fingers. When she finally released me, I sat back in my chair, gasping, startled, and tense as the mainmast of a clipper ship. She giggled, looking down and seeing my obvious excitement. For 9 years, she said, I took care of you. You are the most perfect man I have ever met. You never even looked at me the wrong way, checked my legs or butt, or groped me. And I loved you for it. I've been waiting for you for 9 years, and now you are free. I know that you have always respected me, and that is also a kind of love. We're a great team. I know you as well as any wife knows her husband. And if you think about it, you know me just the same. Give me a chance to show you that not all women are lying, unfaithful, treacherous. Please. I was stunned. I remembered all the time I spent with her before discovering the betrayal and thought about how I had treated her. I had vehemently defended her against my business partner, even to the point of getting him kicked out of the business. Then I realized that I had and still have real feelings for Felicia. It dawned on me that it was impossible to work closely with someone for so long and not develop something. While I was with Caroline, there was no need to explore these feelings or evaluate them. But now, there was definitely such a need. Do you have anything to say? She asked, concern evident on her face. How many? I asked. She looked puzzled. How much of what? She asked. Children, I said. How many children should we have?